Okay, everyone, we're gonna get started here. Jamal's got some great content lined up for us. Jamal, why don't you take it away?
Did you go on mute? Perfect. All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Pretty excited to be having a conversation around industry verticalization, comparing Microsoft, Salesforce, and ServiceNow, and how they're going to market through a focus on industries. As we begin here, I'll just kind of quickly just share, I'd love to make this as interactive as possible. If you have any questions, if you have any input, or you want to dive deep on any particular area, please feel free to, chime in. There's the ability to raise your hand at the top right of the Teams screen. Please use that. We'll get to you as soon as you can, as soon as we can. If you don't want to come off mute and ask the question, please also use the comments section. So with that, let me kind of just quickly introduce myself. As Micah mentioned earlier, I am the managing partner and founding member of Sales Advantage. Our mission is to propel B2B SaaS companies forward by amplifying differentiation and positioning them as trusted advisors to their clients. The way we achieve that is through basically doing customer and market research, and then developing differentiated value proposition, and then hosting, organizing, and driving BDM attendance to industry events. We are very focused on ensuring that our clients build rapid credibility with business decision makers. We focus on things like accelerating new customer acquisition, expanding reach into existing customers, and also reducing churn and increasing adoption of our customers' products. Now, a little bit about me. I've been in the IT industry for about 20 years now. I have actually a finance background. I started by doing long-term strategy and planning within the government space, specifically around business valuation and benefits quantification. I made the switch to the commercial space, where I helped basically Fortune 500 companies build buying processes. I did that for Merck and a few other pharmaceutical organizations, and have always really been really close to trying to understand and figure out the best way that large institutions make investment decisions. In the last 10 years or so, I held various roles at Microsoft. My focus was primarily around the sales process, value selling. I was the opportunity management lead for the company for a few years, and then I also helped Microsoft build MCP, which is the Microsoft consumption process, which helped accelerate the adoption of Microsoft's products and services. And then most recently, I was the director for global sales transformation, where we focused on building the capabilities in our sales force to sell to business decision makers. As I mentioned, I left Microsoft about 3 years ago and started Sales Advantage, and have been really fortunate to work with some of the largest tech companies in the world, basically break into and have business and value focused discussions with their customers. And one of the things, and we didn't actually start off like this in the very beginning, was having and facilitating these one-on-one conversations between sales and customers. What we found, though, is that there seems to be a greater focus around driving value discussions at scale. And that has led to this big push to this industry verticalization, which is the topic that we're going to cover today. Now, as I mentioned, for those joining us, thank you again. If there's anything you want to go deeper on, or you have a question around, please feel free to either come off mute, raise your hand at the top right of the Teams meeting, or just put in the comment section. We'll get to you as soon as we can. Okay. So there's going to be 5 sections to this. There's going to be a lot of content. It's going to be pretty hot and heavy. I'll try to get through it as fast as I possibly can. But again, let me know if there's any particular area you want to kind of focus in on and go deeper. So the 5 topics we're going to cover. Number 1 is, who is this presentation for? We want to take a second and just make sure that we're aligning the outcomes of this discussion to the roles that it's most relevant for. So we're going to take some time and talk through that. We're then going to talk about the B2B business strategies for some of the largest tech companies in the world. And again, there's nothing specific we're going to go here. It's actually going to be an aggregated view looking across about 100 different tech companies. Then we're going to talk about industry classification, how tech companies look at industries. We'll look at some industry standards and some other options that are being used out there. Then we're going to go into the comparison criteria. So effectively, as I mentioned, we've got 3 specific companies we're going to focus in on, but we're going to first make sure that we're having a pretty decent conversation first around how are we looking at the landscape. We'll talk about that, and then finally we'll dive in to the results. All right, so who is this for? Okay, first and foremost, there's 2 camps that you can really hone these discussions around and make sure that this is the most relevant audiences around. And those 2 camps is marketing and then and basically sales. And for marketing, there's 2 specific personas that we typically engage with around industry discussions are product marketing or product management and then industry marketing managers. Okay, their focus primarily is to develop customer contact messaging, building ads, building content for webinars and events of that nature, building white papers, right? And so they're primarily focused on building credibility with business decision makers at scale. Okay, the other camp that we also have a lot of conversations around going to market and having an industry conversation around is customer success and sales teams. And they're specifically looking to drive the usage of products and services, obviously express a unique value proposition to their accounts, identifying outcomes that their accounts are trying to achieve, and then obviously building solutions. And basically their focus is around engaging directly with business decision makers. And so as we go through this, you'll find that all of the strategies, all of the approaches, they really do fit in really well to these specific personas. Okay. Now, I will say, obviously, if you're not one of these roles, this is still obviously can be very relevant, both in terms of how you think about going to market and engaging with customers. But these are the primary roles that we engage with the most. Okay. All right, so now let's get into the B2B business strategy. Okay. Now, when we talk about B2B business SaaS business strategies, what we're looking at are tech companies that provide some type of software service solution. And in this exercise, we actually analyzed around 100 or so within the US and a few other geographies around the world, but primarily focusing in on the US. And what we found, interestingly, is that the mission of a lot of these tech companies, the B2B SaaS companies, are very similar. Okay, and we tried to aggregate as many of these insights as we possibly could into this view. And there's another section we'll talk about more specifics, but effectively what we found is that most B2B SaaS companies, their mission is to empower their customers to create new experiences, to optimize workflows, so they can engage with their customers, partners, and employees in new and different ways. Okay, so that is the primary mission of a lot of these B2B SaaS. The next piece we're going to talk about are the investments that they're making to achieve this goal. Now, what we've done is everything highlighted in orange specifically relates to industry verticalization or some type of investment to have that value discussion around verticals. Now, there are other things we'll touch on as well, but I really just want to focus on the industry piece. So one of the few things we're seeing is in terms of investments, strategic acquisitions to further improve the value of their products and offerings. A few examples of these include the acquisitions that Microsoft just made around Nuance. Actually, they made this a few years ago, specifically around building out their healthcare portfolio, which we'll dive here more here in a second. But there's obviously other acquisitions you can look at as well that Salesforce has done with Velocity to really help penetrate the industry verticals and things of that nature, which we'll also touch on. But again, no issues or holding back with making these strategic acquisitions, specifically around driving industry discussions. The next thing that the other investment we're seeing is expanding relationships with existing customers. And again, that is achieved through understanding the customer footprint, their industry, and the personas within that environment to have those broader business value conversations. Again, you'll see targeting vertical industries as another focus area, prompting strong customer adoption and reducing customer attrition, and providing counsel and insights based on deep industry knowledge and experience. So already you're seeing within these companies, the heavy investments being made within the industry verticalization. The next piece I'll talk about quickly is the outcomes they're trying to achieve through industry verticalization. They want to improve differentiation, balance revenue, and diversify client mix, improving market share, deepening the client relationships, and then building a strong reputation. Again, this is just a few of the industry-specific ones that we're want to touch on. The next piece we want to talk about is the campaigns and the projects that we're also seeing being run out there. So the first campaign that I think is very obvious, shouldn't be any type of surprise to anybody, is expanding the customer base, or basically getting new logos. Every single tech company is extremely focused on this. There's probably a scorecard, some metric that probably each and every single one of you are probably focused around in achieving around new logos, expanding multi-offering adoption with their existing customers. So basically cross-sell, upsell, targeting new functional areas and business units, developing indirect distribution channels for their solutions. So this is a partner play that we're seeing, but again, is something that a lot of larger tech companies are focused around. And then lastly, providing solutions specifically built for customers in certain industries, such as financial services, healthcare, life science, government, and so on. Okay. I'm not going to bottom out the projects, the specific projects, but you can just see really quickly that there is a huge emphasis around marketing, big push on marketing, a lot of investments and efforts being made to drive specific industry messaging. You see a lot of things around account-based marketing, driving further expansion across those verticals and things of that nature. All right, just to kind of stay on time here, I want to kind of move forward now and move into the area to figure out like how industry verticalization is happening at these specific templates. But to do that first, what we need to have a conversation around is what are some standard industry classification systems out there, okay? Now, here's a list of a number of the most popular ones, but we're gonna focus specifically on two, okay? One is called the North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS for short, and the other one is the Standard Industry Classification System developed by the Security Exchange Commission, or the SEC. You probably have seen or used the SIC designations, but NAICS actually was built to replace SIC, which I'll talk about here in more just a second. Okay. So let's have a discussion real quick around the difference between the SIC and the NAICS and why it's important to really understand the differences between those two. So first off, the SIC, the Standard Industrial Classification System, was developed by the SEC in 1937. Okay, its primary use case was for different US agencies to measure, analyze, and share data. Now, believe it or not, even though it was built in 1937, it actually has not changed and been updated as much as you think. And it's actually also a very flat system, meaning that you have designations between certain number ranges that fall into certain industry categories. And I think there's only about like 11 high-level industries that the SIC specifically caters to. Now, because the Security Exchange Commission uses this around their, they still use it today, actually. If you go to the SEC website, you'll see that the SIC designation. Because you use that, a lot of tech companies also use it. But one thing we'll share really quickly is it's probably not the right classification system to use. And the reason being is because it's just not robust enough to really capture what actually is happening, out there in terms of the landscape within industries. What we recommend is to use the North American Industry Classification System, or the NAICS, which was actually developed in 1997 to replace the SIC. Okay, it was actually developed in collaboration with the Mexico National Institute of Statistics and Geography, Statistics Canada, and the Office and Management Budget within the US. Okay, they actually updated every 2 or 3 years. And the reason why we feel it's a much better system for industry classification is because it's multi-level, meaning that there's high-level industries and then there's sub-industries within the high-level industry that the industry is comprised of. And we'll talk about more why that's so important, especially as a tech company, we start thinking about going to market through industry verticalization. Okay. Now, again, I'm not going to go more deeper than I have right now on these two, but albeit to say there's tons of information out there around these two models, and actually we'll throw some links out there for you guys to do some research on your own around NAICS. Okay. The next piece we're going to talk about is why it's important to designate between high-level industry and sub-industry. Okay, and we're going to take the insurance industry just as an example to just make a quick point. You see some tech companies go out and say, hey, we have a solution around insurance or healthcare or financial services, and they kind of stay at the high level. The reason why we suggest going down the sub-vertical, specifically identifying the sub-vertical, is because the sub-industries within the high-level industry can be incredibly, incredibly different. Okay, now we'll take, again, insurance here just for a moment. Within insurance, I believe there's about 23 or 24 different sub-industries, okay? And the sub-industries include like automobile insurance, credit insurance, disability insurance, and you name it. There's all these different types of sub-industries. And each sub-industry can have a different customer, a different product, and basically different operations. And so if you don't go down and specify the sub-industry that you're trying to go after, you really lose a lot of BDMs. It's not as specific as you think. And because it's not specific, if you just say, hey, I have an insurance solution, and you don't go down to a sub-industry level, it's really difficult to connect the dots between like, is this relevant for me and what I do? And we'll talk about how that's being done by some tech companies, again, with the examples we've chosen. But again, we really, really specifically suggest going at the sub-industry level. The last piece I'll just quickly touch on also is geography, okay? You cannot assume that sub-industries in the same geo or across all geos are the same as well. And I'll take healthcare as a specific example, and specifically health insurance, okay? Health insurance between Canada and the US are incredibly different, incredibly different. So you can't take a solution that you've built for Canada and take it to the US, or vice versa. And you can't assume that it's going to work or it's going to be relevant to those goals, because again, different outcomes, different processes, different, obviously constituents. Okay, so that's just the piece I want to talk about, the difference between high-level industry and sub-industry. Now, what we want to do before we get into the actual comparison criteria, which is the meat of what we were talking about, are different sub-verticals. So just like I talked, sub-verticals for computer software. So just like we talked about this high-level industry and sub-industries, within the computer software high-level industry, there's actually 64 sub-industries. Now, the sub-verticals. Now, those sub-verticals can actually be bucketized into 3 major groups. All software companies can fall under either providing industry solutions, business capabilities, or technical functionality, okay? Now, the reason why it's important to understand this is because if, as a tech company yourself, you're trying to do industry verticalization, it's a little bit different in terms of how you would kind of do that verticalization based on what type of company you are. And again, this is just quickly a description around the not only types of tech companies and the types of industry verticalization approaches, but also the 3 that we've chosen fall into each one of these categories uniquely. Okay, so now let's get into the comparison criteria. So just want to kind of level set here and just kind of share what we're going to be talking about The first piece we're going to cover are history and origins for the tech companies. For Microsoft, Salesforce, and ServiceNow, we'll talk about when they were founded, the annual revenue, income, employees, and an original industry classification and the direction in which they are going. It is very, very possible for actual tech companies to move across the different categories. We'll talk more about that here in just a second. Then we'll talk about industry alignment. We're going to talk about the high-level industry focus that each of these tech companies are kind of go after, the sub-vertical and presence and the solutions that they have in market. And then lastly, we'll do a breakdown around like what the product actually consists of. Now, before I get to the next slide here, I just do also want to make a quick point that everything, all the information that we're using here is found through public available means, 10Ks, annual reports, the customer's website. There's nothing in here that would be deemed confidential. It's all based off of the research that we actually performed around B2B SaaS companies and the insights that we gained through these public sources. Okay. All right, so now let's get into the meat of the discussion. So the first company we're going to look at is Microsoft. Okay, and a few items to note about Microsoft and their goals, their objectives. Their mission as a company is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. Again, everybody knows they were founded in 1985. They actually started as an operating system company, creating operating systems, and everybody knows the story there. Now, obviously today, if you look at what Microsoft is doing, they use so much more than obviously creating operating systems. And actually, you could argue they have a product that fits into all three of those categories that we're looking at. And mind you, not every tech company is going to fit neatly in each of those categories, but albeit to say, again, Microsoft does a lot. They have a lot of solutions. The primary area we're going to focus on for Microsoft is to make us an apples-to-apples comparison with Salesforce and ServiceNow is Dynamics 365. Okay, and we'll cover that here just more in just a second. They have revenues from last year about 143 billion, with a net income about 44.3 billion. They haven't released their fiscal year hasn't ended yet. It ends in June in a few days. However, my belief is that we'll probably see their release statements for their fiscal year and to be in the $160 billion range based on the trajectory they've been on and the results they've produced in the last 3 quarters or so. And again, incredible growth, especially since about 2016, for Microsoft. But if you look at how they, where the revenue comes from, they report out to the street 3 areas or 3 segments, okay? And each segment is roughly around 30%, 33%, or a third of their income. They segment out their operating businesses to what they refer to as productivity and business process, which consists of Office 365, Dynamics 365, and both their on-prem and cloud offerings. Intelligent Cloud, which is Azure, all their Power BI, or the reporting, also Windows Server products. And then lastly is what they refer to as more personal computing, which is actual Windows devices, the licenses, the software there, as well as like Xbox and things like that. Okay. Now, one thing I'll quickly just note here around productivity and business process is that segment is, which includes Dynamics 365, doesn't give us a lot of insight in terms of how much revenue is coming from Dynamics 365 or the business process automation solution, right? That being said, Office 365 has a huge market share, and so primarily accounts for a majority of the revenues within that operating segment. Okay, and so if you kind of do the math and you kind of look at how much revenue or how much market share they currently have with 365, it actually is on par with some of the other companies that we're going to look at in terms of where they sit and how much presence they have in that space. Okay. The next piece we're going to look at is industry alignment. So as of June 22nd, yesterday, Microsoft has announced within the last year that they are going to focus on what they refer to as 5 industry clouds. Okay. retail, healthcare, manufacturing, financial services, and nonprofit. Okay. Now, again, as of yesterday, June 22nd, only one of those clouds, healthcare, is available to purchase today. Retail, manufacturing, financial services are all in public preview, and nonprofit doesn't have a date yet, but they say public preview is coming in soon. Okay. The categories, or what you see, the different industry and the subverticals you see on the right is essentially how the industries that Microsoft said they're going after aligns to the high-level industry and the subverticals they're specifically referring to. So, for example, when they say, "Hey, we have a financial services solution," what they actually have is a banking solution that focuses on commercial banking, credit unions, and regional banks. Their retail solution is very primarily focused on apparel retail. When they talk about healthcare, what they're talking about is specifically catering to general medical and surgical hospitals, general physicians and clinics, and then home healthcare. Within manufacturing, it's commercial equipment sales, industrial equipment and machinery, industrial manufacturing and services. And then lastly, for nonprofits, they want to cater to charities, civic nonprofit groups, and the other social services institutions, such as those. Now, what we've also done to get to that level of understanding is understand like what the actual solution is, and then map it to the specific subverticals that we're focused on. And so to do that, what we basically did was based on the solutions that go to market, we look at their products and then basically aligned it, or just understand what the products consist of. We have another example here that is much easier to read, but what I wanted to kind of just share with you is that their industry solutions all consist of these primary elements: the mix of Dynamics 365, which again is their business process automation solution, Azure, Microsoft Power Platform, and Teams. So what they're looking to do is basically using CRM as its core, a lot of automation and reporting, as well as collaboration built through Teams or Microsoft, what they're referring to as 365. Okay, and the best visual that we could find is basically this. Okay, and so each of the industry vertical solutions that Microsoft is going to market with is effectively templates and workflows in a if you will, configured package of bundled software that are interconnected to meet a specific business process or need within the industry that they're actually targeting. Okay. One last thing I just want to quickly share as we move into the next section, which is going to be for Salesforce, is this heavy emphasis around Dynamics 365. Now, as I mentioned before, Dynamics 365, as part of its bigger picture, probably doesn't account for the largest chunk of revenue for the operating system segment that they're a part of. However, is really key to tying all of these industry solutions together. It's such a huge, I'd say, an important piece of the larger puzzle, especially when we talk about building a specific industry solution, for those markets. Okay? So the next section we're going to talk about is Salesforce. So again, Salesforce, we'll just talk about their mission really quickly. It's to empower their customers to connect with their customers in entirely new ways through cloud, mobile, social, Internet things, and artificial intelligence. Founded in 1999. And their NAICS designation is actually customer relationship management. That's what they started off with. And it's a business capability, obviously, that they're building for the market. Now, this is their core. This is what they've always done. They have about 56,000 employees, revenues of 22 billion, 22.3 billion, and a net income of about 4 billion. And what's interesting to note about Salesforce and how they've been growing, I think, since the very beginning, is they've had a pretty consistent growth of about 15 to 20%, or maybe over 20%, I believe, for the last 10 years. Now, if you look at their actual operating segment, they divide it up into 4 buckets. So sales, which is their traditional Salesforce Cloud, Salesforce automation, sorry, Salesforce, opportunity management and CRM piece comes in about 5 billion. Their Service Cloud comes in at about 5.3 billion, platform and other, and then marketing commerce. And so what's really interesting here, I think, is this year, for the first time, their Sales Cloud, the traditional cloud, comes in third behind Service Cloud and Platform Cloud. Now, the other element to this is I want to focus on is Platform Cloud, which includes Tableau and MuleSoft. Tableau is the reporting infrastructure, and MuleSoft is their ability to connect with different data elements within customers' environments. And what's really, I think, powerful about this story, where their platform business has grown so significantly, is the fact that data is at the core of all of these solutions, and they actually have a pretty robust offering, which I think when you tie it together with their core CRM platform and their other industry solutions, is quite impressive. And again, if you look at a jump in revenue between fiscal year 2020 and then 2021, I believe it grew 2 billion. I mean, it's pretty huge jump just in that small time frame. Okay. The next piece we'll talk about is the areas that Salesforce is currently participating in, both in terms of industry and the sub-verticals. Now, the interesting thing about the Salesforce, and I do have to tip my hat, I think, to that company, is that they are doing an exceptional job with the sub-verticalization of their solution. So again, yesterday, as the June 22nd, they had 11 distinct industry clouds, 11. And within those 11, financial services and healthcare cloud have specific sub-vertical solutions, okay? We'll talk about what those are here in just a second, but again, within financial services, which again is absolutely the right industry to go after, being that financial services institutions typically spend between 7 and 9% of their annual revenue on IT, is also arguably the most complex industry that's out there. There are, I believe, around 30 different sub-verticals within the financial services space, and each sub-vertical is incredibly different. And the specific sub-verticals that Salesforce accounts for is corporate investment banking, core banking, insurance. They actually place insurance is, you could argue, another vertical on it together, but that's fine. Wealth and asset management, and then mortgage lending. Each one of those sub-verticals, again, different operations, different products, different customers, even potentially. So it's nice to see that they've gone to that sub-vertical level. Absolutely the right thing to do. Same thing with healthcare and life sciences. They have solutions for payers, providers, pharma, and medtech. And then I'm not going to read the rest, but you can kind of see these other verticals that they've lined up as well. Okay? The next couple of things that I'm going to touch on just really quickly is the alignment that they have with the alignment to the NAICS standard industry classification system. Okay. Now, it's actually quite robust. I'm not going to read all of these out, but their current solutions maps to the current NAICS industry classification system through automotive, through banks, the civic nonprofits and membership groups, education, energy, environment, financial services, food and beverage, hospitals and healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, media, nonprofit, pharmaceutical and biotechnology, and then telecommunications as well. And you can see those sub-verticals under those are pretty robust, pretty deep. Now, we know that through the acquisition of Velocity, Salesforce is going to continue to drive horizontally, probably through more industries, and deeper vertically through the sub-industries as well. And it's absolutely the right thing to do, especially as they kind of build the messaging and the go-to-market strategies to cater to those specific business processes. Okay. Now, let me take a second and kind of tie it back, the products that they have and how their business process automation solution, which started obviously as CRM, is at the core of everything that this it comprises of. So business process automation at the end of the day is digitizing manual processes, okay? And CRM, Salesforce, as it first started off, was doing that for sellers, for marketers, and things like that. And what's really, I think, interesting is that unfortunately, a lot of people still think Salesforce is just for sales, just for sellers. And what's pretty wild is that they didn't change their name. They're not going to change the branding. They shouldn't do that, actually. But they're taking that same methodology, the same approach, and now applying it to different personas. And you can see that each one of these specific products and solution areas is, with its core, you have sales, but then mapping it out to other industry areas. It's basically a smattering of different elements, just like Microsoft did in creating that solution to kind of bring those specific industry solutions to market. Now, the one thing I'll quickly just touch on here before we go to ServiceNow, which I think is also a pretty interesting platform, is that very rarely does a single product enable a business capability. Okay? Very rarely does a single product enable business capability. A solution, by definition, is a combination of products and services that meet the business need. Okay. One more time, I'll say that. So, a solution, by definition, is by definition a combination of products and services that meet the business need, and that is the trick. It's not just one product. Okay. And I think the one thing that Salesforce has done that I've been personally impressed with is to be able to weave in multiple products under a specific business capability. And that is absolutely the right thing to do. It's hard to execute on. We won't get into the details around that, but at the end of the day, that is absolutely the right thing to do. And you kind of see Microsoft is doing the same thing with combining a number of their products under industry solutions as well. Okay, so now let's talk about ServiceNow. Okay, now we picked ServiceNow because arguably, and I'll talk about this here in just a second, they actually fit in within the industry aligned tech company. Now they were listed as providing solutions for the IT services industry. Okay, now you could argue, like that's not really a specific vertical, but any organization out there that has an IT department has a need for IT services and support, operations management, and things of that nature. And so just by the sheer approach that they're taking in optimizing or automating IT operations and service management, their footprint is pretty insane. It's pretty large. They were founded in 2003, currently have about 13,000 employees and revenues about $4 billion. And again, has been growing pretty steadily since about 2015, with a net income this year about 118 million, heavily investing in R&D and growing their service and sales business. But overall, the key theme here is you have a IT service management company that has at its core a platform to do business process automation. And they're seeing this opportunity to now move into enabling and using that platform to automate business processes by industry. They specifically operate within two operating segments, so not a lot of information here, unfortunately, in terms of where the revenue is being made across their products, albeit to say that they have something called digital workflow products, which includes a number of different elements, which I'll talk about here in just a second. And then you have something called ITOM products, which I'm not 100% sure. However, I believe is probably their more traditional legacy operating. I think it's based off of instance and nodes, like a server you can purchase either installed locally or hosted in the cloud. But the thing to note is that the digital workflow products are mind-blowingly expansive. So they've got the Now platform, but they also have IT service management, IT business management, DevOps, IT asset management, security operations, governance and risk, HR service delivery. It's quite a lot in terms of what those products specifically consist of, and I'll talk about more in a deeper level what those elements are and how they tie back to the industry solutions. But albeit to say, ServiceNow has a pretty strong, I'd say, or expansive support today for industries. They cover education, energy, financial services, government, healthcare, logistics, manufacturing, retail, service providers, and they bundle together telecom, media, and actually tech companies together. And we'll dive into that with that more in a second. But one thing that I really like, again, what you're seeing here is that within financial services, they specifically break out banking, insurance, and wealth management. Absolutely the right thing to do. They do that for government. There's a designation between federal and national, state, local, and regional. Within healthcare, they look at providers, life sciences, and payers. And within telecom and medtech and technology, they specifically kind of segment out telecom and tech companies. If you're a tech company or IT service provider, they've got a solution for you there as well. And then the mapping that they have specifically to the NAICS includes banks, education, energy, utilities, financial services, government, and retail, as I mentioned. And then also hospitals, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, nonprofit, pharmaceutical, and telecommunications. So not as deep as Salesforce, however, great, I think, expansive breadth of industries, and then going deep vertically. It's great to see that as well. Okay. The last thing I'll just quickly touch on here, okay, is what is their platform, what it consists of. And I think one of the things that I really like about the way ServiceNow is going about this is, you buy the platform, and then within that platform, you've got a number of workflows and different solutions that you can use to basically light up the different scenarios that you have. And so I think it's a little bit different approach, obviously, than selling a specific cloud solution or what have you. I think it also makes it pretty extensive in terms of its configurability, its ability to develop new workflows to meet certain business processes and things of that nature. And so it'll be interesting to see how ServiceNow is both thinking in terms of the industry they cover, but more importantly, the specific business processes and the sub-verticals that they want to cater to as well. But albeit to say, their core focus still is IT workflows. They do a lot of IT service management, what they refer to as employee workflows, customer workflows, which a lot of the industry solutions fall under, and then creator workflows is kind of the starter build that they provide that you can kind of build off of and get through and customize for your organization as well. All right, guys. So that was a very, very quick, down and dirty walkthrough around industry verticalization for Microsoft, Salesforce, and ServiceNow. Happy to stay on if you guys have any specific questions. I'd love to answer anything specific you want to maybe kind of walk through. But what I'll just share really quickly is, again, thank you so much for taking the time to spend your morning, your afternoon, your evening with us to kind of have this discussion. I want to just kind of share that we'll be sending out a survey for those that attended. Please fill out the survey by Friday to be entered in a drawing for a $20 Starbucks gift card. Within that survey, you'll be asked, how we did as presenters, the content, if it was relevant to your role. And then lastly, if you want to share some of these insights with your team, okay? What we have found, if you are a tech company that is trying to have a business value conversation with a customer, the way to do it is to demonstrate knowledge by industry. And one of the things that we really focus on and are really passionate about is doing the research, mapping it to your products, developing those differentiated value propositions, and then helping you position yourself as trusted advisors to your clients. So if you'd like to have a conversation around how we've done that for other organizations, please do let us know. If you'd like to share these insights with your team, please let us know. We'd love to drive a conversation with you there as well. So with that, I want to thank everybody again. I'll stay on for a few more minutes if you guys would like to come off mute, or if you have any questions, have any comments, do please let me know. But have a great Wednesday, have a great rest of the week, and we'll talk to you guys soon.